There's probably going to be times in maybe February, although there's basketball going on in February, but late April, May, July, there's going to be points where we get to a Monday or a Tuesday of these morning pits and we wonder ourselves, what are we going to talk about? Not much to recap from the weekend, and not a whole lot happened. No basketball, no football, no recruiting. Nothing's really going on. There's going to be times in the next 8 months where we struggle to find topics and things to talk about. This is not one of those times. As a matter of fact, I don't know how much we're going to do our best to fit everything into today's episode from the weekend, because it was truly a weekend to remember for Pitt sports, particularly the football program and the volleyball program, as well as news happening on the basketball front and just all over the place. It was a busy weekend, and we're going to recap as much of it as we possibly can here on the Monday edition of the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Monday. It's the Morning Pitt. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I keep making a list over here on my legal pad. This is the start of the day, start of the week right here. And by the end of the week, this will be filled with random stats and touchdown counts and 3-point shots and all kinds of stuff. But I started off by making a list of the topics we had to talk about on the Monday edition of the Morning Pitt. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Conservatively, there are like 9 different things to talk about. And who knows, there might even be more before we're done. But we'll get to as much as we can. You know the deal, of course. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you never miss any of our video content right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. These Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. The live show every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. We have post-game press conferences and midweek press conferences and interviews and highlights and all kinds of stuff. We have live shows. The Wednesday night live stream is always 8:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. on Wednesday nights. We have some post-game shows that we do as well. Lots of stuff, all for you right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Then, of course, the website below, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, to get all the Pitt sports coverage that you could possibly handle. And I think we did a pretty solid job throughout this offensive coordinator search. Pretty much almost exactly 2 weeks. Really, if you go from Frank Cignetti getting fired on November 26th, the day after the Duke game, up until yesterday when Pitt officially announced that Western Carolina offensive coordinator Cade Bell will be taking that position at Pitt. And that's the biggest news to come out of the weekend. A weekend that was full of big news. That's the biggest one. I think we did a pretty decent job covering it at Panther-Lair.com. If you were on the site over those last 2 weeks, I think you had a pretty good idea of what was going on in the search. I think you heard some of these names first there and sort of followed the process. But most importantly, it got done. And it's over. The search is over, and now they're moving on to the next step of filling out the staff and getting Cade Bell acclimated. Who is Cade Bell? He's a young guy. He graduated from Jacksonville in 2015, became a GA, I think at Valdosta State, moved into a coordinating position there, a pass game coordinator or something like that, on his father's staff, Kerwin Bell. Went to USF as an analyst, and then went to Tusculum, where he was an offensive coordinator for a few years until 2021 when he joined his father's staff again at Western Carolina. And he's been there for the last 3 years. And the mighty Catamounts, have had a top 10 offense in FCS each of the last 3 years. This past year, they were top 10 in total offense, scoring offense, passing offense, and I think top 25 in rushing offense. Cade Bell likes to say, play fast, score faster. And I think all Pitt fans can get on board with that concept. Whatever you want to say about Cade Bell and his resume or anything else about this hire, if there's an offensive coordinator coming to Pitt who's saying play fast and score faster, you have to like that, right? Like, just on a very surface level. After watching what you've watched over the last 2 years, 2 years ago, where the only saving grace for Pitt's offense was a generational running back, or if not generational, a very, very good running back, to this year where Pitt had multiple games where they scored 1 touchdown, multiple games where they scored 0 offensive touchdowns, and, had an offense that scoring wise ranked in the bottom 10 or 15 of all of FBS with a plodding, nonsensical approach and scheme and system that just, you didn't know what they were trying to accomplish. And you got the sense that they didn't know what they were trying to accomplish. But fairly often, or more often than it should, it sort of felt like the goal wasn't to score points, which appears to be counterintuitive to what you're there to do. Well, they're bringing in someone who does want to score points and does like to score points and does score points and has scored points. And that's Cade Bell. Now, he's young. He's inexperienced. He's had 1 year at the FBS level, and that was as an analyst. He hasn't called plays at the FBS level. He hasn't been a position coach at the FBS level, let alone Power 5. It's not even like he's coming here after being the offensive coordinator at Bowling Green or, Western Kentucky, as opposed to Western Carolina. This is someone who's making a big, big jump from the Southern Conference to the ACC. That's not an insignificant jump. And how he does in that transition, we'll see. There's something to be said for the idea that if you've got a good scheme, particularly in college football, you can probably apply it across levels. Now, this is not a 100% proposition. It's not something that's been, guaranteed to work every time. But if you've got a good scheme and you've got an offensive approach and you understand how to use personnel, you understand how to create matchup advantages for your team and get the ball to your playmakers and give them an opportunity to make plays, if you understand how to do those things, it should apply across levels to a certain extent. And obviously, you're going to face a more challenging level of defense, more talented athletes on defense, and that's going to make things maybe a little bit more difficult. But presumably, you should also have a higher level of talent on offense that you're working with. And we'll talk this week about how Pitt's offense is shaping up for next season. But with pretty much, all but one major weapon returning, Bub Means looking like the only major weapon from 2023 who's not going to return in 2024, you've got, I think, some talent to work with. And again, we'll talk maybe tomorrow, maybe on Wednesday, about some of that talent and kind of how it fits in and what Cade Bell might do with those guys and what all that is shaping up to look like for next season. But I think there's enough talent that a good coordinator, a talented coordinator, an innovative coordinator who's got, something approaching, I hate to use these terms like modern college football offense, but understands that if you get the ball to your playmakers, if you create matchup advantages, and you get the ball to your playmakers in space or with an opportunity to make plays, you're probably going to make plays and you're probably going to score points. And I have to think, again, if you've watched Pitt for the last 2 years, just hearing an offensive coordinator who has that mindset of play fast and score faster has to be music to your ears, I would think. And maybe not. Maybe you look at this and you can't get past the resume and you can't get past, the lack of experience at the higher level. But I think this quote is telling. It's a quote from Pat Narduzzi in the press conference in his press release. He says, "Cade's offensive approach, relentlessly fast and aggressive, is everything a defensive coordinator hates to face and the type of system our players will absolutely love." He had more in his quote that we can read, but I really think, that should strike a nerve in a good way for you, because I think it was something, it was said on the message boards. It was a pretty smart comment that someone said, when Pat Narduzzi's hiring an offensive coordinator, why doesn't he look at it from this perspective of what would I hate to face as a defensive coordinator? If Pat Narduzzi's greatest strength as a coach is coordinating a defense and calling a defense, why not look for those coordinators who would drive him absolutely nuts? Wouldn't that make sense? And I think Pat Narduzzi is a really smart guy when it comes to defensive football. And I think he's had a lot of success coaching defense and designing defense and attacking offenses and taking offenses out of their rhythm and slowing them down. I think he's done a great job of that. He's built a whole career out of it. So why not look at it and say, who would really get under my skin? Who calls an offense that would just drive me nuts and cost me a lot of nights of sleep each week leading up to the game? And I think he's found a coordinator who would do that. Does this mean he's given up on pro-style offense and this and that? I don't know. I can't say. But what I can say is he's gone outside his comfort zone on a number of levels. And this might be the thing that should be the most encouraging for Pitt fans, honestly. Because I think Pitt fans' most common complaints about Pat Narduzzi's offensive coordinator hires is that he's hired old coaches, veterans, experience, retreads, you might use that term. That term has been used. And guys who all sort of play a certain kind of way. And look, there were differences. There were big differences between Jim Chaney and Matt Canada and Sean Watson and Mark Whipple and Frank Signetti. They all called different things. But none was as significant of a departure as what we've got right now. You know, what we're looking at coming into Pitt right now with Cade Bell. This is the most significant departure we've seen from Pat Narduzzi. He has gone outside of his comfort zone in terms of the experience level of the coordinator he's hiring, of the style of coordinator he's hiring, the style of offensive coordinator he's hiring. And if you want evidence, and I think a lot of Pitt fans did, that Pat Narduzzi was just fed up and sick and tired of the lackluster offense of the last two seasons, I mean, this is your evidence. This is your indication, because he's gone pretty far in the opposite direction on a lot of levels. And so if you can't necessarily convince, if you're struggling to convince yourself about Western Carolina's offense, if you're struggling to convince yourself about Cade Bell's bona fides or his resume, just look at that and say, well, if nothing else, Narduzzi has broken the mold in this instance. And maybe for all the claims of being stubborn and refusing to change his ways and refusing this and refusing that, Narduzzi seems to have been pretty open to something different. And I think, we talked a lot about a lot of candidates. And I think, over the last 2 weeks, we talked about a bunch of guys. And some of the guys that we really focused on and talked about the most, I think all represented departures for Narduzzi from what he has done in the past. And I think that's good. That should be encouraging. That a guy who's entering year 10 as the head coach is looking at a situation and saying, all right, we need to get better and we need to do things differently. We need to do things not the way we did them before to give us a better chance to win. And so I say kudos to Narduzzi for that. And if nothing else, it should be really interesting to see what this offense looks like with Cade Bell calling the plays. All right, we're going to talk a lot more about Bell this week. We're talking a lot more about how he'll fit. We'll try and get some expert voices on here to get some more insight into him. But that's the first thought there. Let's move on to some more. And to be honest, the second biggest story this weekend, and there were a lot of stories. Like I said, there was like 9 different things we could talk about. The second biggest story this weekend, the volleyball team. Pitt Volleyball going back to the Final Four for the 3rd year in a row. And for a good part of the day on Saturday afternoon, it looked like it wasn't going to happen. Panthers rolled through the first 3 rounds of the NCAA tournament. The opening rounds, they the Sweet 16, they beat Washington State, and they advanced to face Louisville, their old foe Louisville, their rival Louisville, who they lost to in the Final Four last year, who they split the regular season with last year, split the regular season with them again this year, each team winning on their home court, and now here in the regional finals with a chance to go to the Final Four for a 3rd year in a row, number 1 seed Pitt against number 2 seed Louisville. This is exactly what you wanted to have happen, and it was. It would have been great if Louisville could have ended up in a different bracket, so Pitt could have faced Louisville in the Final Four of the national championship, but the regional final will do. That was a pretty good setting, and it all happened at the Fitzgerald Fieldhouse. Tickets sold out in like 10 minutes for that thing. They could have put it at the Peterson Event Center, and they very well may have sold it out if they did. But with the Pitt basketball game Saturday night, they weren't able to move it, change the venues, so they stuck with the Fieldhouse. And that place looked like it was rocking. I wasn't over there. Watched most of it on my computer, with the stream. And when Pitt went down 2-0, it looked pretty bleak. And I think most people had given up hope. And then the Panthers rallied and won the 3rd set. And by the end of the 3rd set, it was pretty clear that they had the momentum. They won the 4th set and then just absolutely kicked the crap out of Louisville in the 5th set to knock out the Cardinals and advance to the Final Four. What a gutsy effort and a gutsy performance to not get down, to not give up after falling behind 2-0, knowing that a sweep or a 3-1 loss was looking pretty likely. But they didn't give up. They stayed in it, and they fought back. And a really talented team. I mean, they're a really talented team, but Louisville's a really talented team as well. And you've got to find that extra something. And those women found that extra something. And it was really, really impressive to watch. Really inspiring to watch. Really impressive to watch. And now they're headed to the Final Four. I think their first game, I forgot what time it is, but it's on Thursday in Tampa, taking on Nebraska. And we'll see if they can advance to the national championship game. This will be the third year in a row they've made the national semifinals. Got bounced the last two. Here's a chance. And it's funny, I was at the Peterson Event Center as that Louisville match was ending, and the Pitt basketball game was going on. Pitt was sort of wrestling around with Canisius, and Canisius was hanging in there, and Canisius was leading at points. And there are various TVs around the Peterson Event Center, and they were showing the volleyball match. And as Pitt won, as they were getting closer to that 15th point in the fifth set, there started being little pockets of cheers. And then when they actually won and closed it out, there was like a pretty sizable cheer. And at the next media timeout, they showed the final point up on the video board, and it was the loudest cheer of the day. It really was. It was the loudest cheer of the day. The T-shirt toss was the second loudest cheer of the day. That was the loudest cheer of the day. Bigger than anything that happened in the basketball game. And so people were excited. They were fired up. I think that impacted the attendance at the basketball game. Fitzgerald Fieldhouse only holds like 3,000 or whatever it is. But I think most of those 3,000 probably would have been at the Pitt basketball game if not for the volleyball match. But they chose volleyball because it was a huge game. And kudos to Dan Fisher and his team for pulling it out. I mean, what a win. That is the most successful program in Pitt athletics right now. And Dan Fisher is one of the great coaches in all of Pitt athletics right now, and maybe in Pitt athletics history. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. 3 straight Final Fours at Pitt? Like Pitt is a volleyball school? I mean, we all know this happened over the last couple of years, but still has to be a little bit strange for people outside the city and outside the program to hear it. All right, Pitt basketball did play Canisius on Saturday night. They ended up winning 82-71. They were losing multiple times. There were 15 lead changes. I think Canisius had a lead within inside of 10 minutes, 9.5 minutes, something like that. But Pitt was able to rattle off a run at the end to put that game away. Blake Hinson scored a pretty quiet 26 points, 8 of 13 from the floor, 3 of 4 from 3. Bub Carrington had 16. Ish Leggett had 13. Canisius just was knocking down a lot of shots. And I think early on, Pitt's defense was a little lazy, a little tired. Jeff Capel put some of it on playing 3 games in 7 days, plus the fact that they were coming off an emotional win over West Virginia. I guess that might be the case. They looked like they were sleepwalking through it. And yeah, 3 games in 7 days where they played Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday. And then to turn around, and with finals week looming, because I think finals week is this coming week, and Pitt doesn't have a game again until Saturday. I guess I could see them sleepwalking a little bit, and they certainly were, particularly on the defensive end. They shot well enough. They shot almost 54% in the first half, but they gave up 52% to Canisius, who also made 7 3-pointers in the first half. And that was really a big part of not only keeping Canisius in the game, but pushing the Griffins ahead. But Pitt eventually took care of what needed to be taken care of. And the biggest storyline coming out of that game is that when they opened the second half, Federico, and Zach Austin were on the bench. Guillermo Diaz-Graham and Will Jeffress started the second half, which was pretty notable. There wasn't any foul trouble to speak of with those players. There wasn't anything, particularly notable other than level of play. Federico and Austin both struggling right now, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens a week from now. I forget who they even play. They play Purdue, Fort Wayne, or South Carolina State, whoever they play on Saturday. We've got like 5 days to figure that out. it's going to be interesting to see who's in the starting lineup, because even though Austin and Federico were in the starting lineup to open the game on Sunday or on Saturday, 2 minutes and 1 second into the game, the 17:59 mark, Jeff Capel sent in Will Jefferson, Guillermo Diaz-Graham. So Austin and Federico started, but 2 minutes in, they were out of the game. And I thought that was pretty interesting. I mean, like the West Virginia game, he made a quick sub with Ish Leggett, but Ish Leggett got in foul trouble. So you kind of understood that. There was no foul trouble for Austin or Federico. They just got pulled and benched. And they didn't come back. Let me just check here. They did not come back. Federico came back at the 11:33 mark. So he started the game, played 2 minutes and 1 second, and then sat for 6.5 minutes. Austin didn't come back until the 8:02 mark. So he started the game, played for 2 minutes and 1 second, and then sat for almost 12 minutes. No. Almost 10 minutes. Yeah, almost 10 minutes. And then came back out for less than 4 minutes later and didn't play again in the first half. Federico came in, had sat out for about 6.5 minutes, came in and played for 2 minutes, and then he didn't return at all. Guillermo Diaz-Graham played the final 9:44 of the first half. And I can't fault Jeff Capel for any of that. Federico's been struggling, and he was struggling in the first half there. Zach Austin it's been a disappearing act with him. Sometimes he's the spark plug. Sometimes he brings so much energy and gets everything going, and sometimes he just disappears. It's like, where does Zach Austin go? Why isn't he having an impact here? I really thought Zach Austin would have bigger contributions than he's had so far, but he's been a disappointment. Yeah, I mean, quite simple. And it's going to be a real question to see if he stays in the starting lineup or if Will Jeffress or even Jorge Diaz-Graham replaces him. What if the Twins end up in the starting lineup on Saturday? What if Guillermo starts in place of Federico and Jorge starts in place of Zach Austin? I think it's probably more likely it would be Will Jeffress, but that's going to be something to monitor this week. It'll be very interesting to see. All right, 2 transfer portal additions? Kind of. Brandon George and Nate Temple said they are coming back. They entered the transfer portal. They went out like the prodigal sons, went out seeking their fortunes and decided the grass was greener where they were. The grass was greener in the south side. That would be a way to say that. And they're coming back. Brandon George and Nate Temple. We talked a lot last week about the depth in the defensive line, particularly the depth of defensive, more defensive tackle than end, but they need help at end as well. And Nate Temple will assist there. Brandon George brings an experienced middle linebacker back to the group, although I'm still curious to see if like a guy like Kyle Lewis or Jordan Bass could play at middle linebacker. Maybe a bit more upside there, I think. But I guess, I mean, technically you could count those guys as transfer portal additions, right? Because they were in the portal, and then they decided to come back. We'll have to decide how to officially term that. However, there was an actual transfer portal addition, and this might be our final note, and we'll get more. We'll have one more thing after this. Timon Lynham, cornerback from Nebraska, was in town over the weekend. He visited and committed to Pitt by all indications of what we can see. He's a 6'2 corner. He's big. He's physical. He's played a lot. He played a decent amount, I would say, at Nebraska. He's got a lot of experience, and he'll come in. He'll be a redshirt senior in 2024, and he'll have the option to return as a super senior in 2025. He was one of 3 transfers who visited this weekend, and as far as we know, the only one to commit so far. We'll see how they do with the other guys. But we did talk a lot last week about needing corners in the transfer portal, and Lynham appears to be the first one, and we'll see how many more they add beyond that, but he definitely shores up that group, or should shore up that group going forward. So nice addition there. There was a loss, though, from incoming players. Jacine Willis, the 4-star running back from New Jersey who committed to Pitt over the summer, took an official visit to Syracuse this past weekend and has flipped to the Orange. He's a 4-star prospect. That looks bad. It's the optics. You'd never like to lose a 4-star, especially when you've only got a few of them. And they just added a new 4-star when Francis Brew, the defensive tackle, got upgraded from 3 stars to 4 stars. It stings to lose a 4-star, but I'm going to be honest. It's running back. And running backs have been devalued in the NFL, and I think we understand why. And I think in college it's even more of a unique situation because not only is it a position where there's not as much value placed on it as there was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but it's also a position where, Pitt in particular has had a ton of success with 3-star running backs and 2-star running backs. I mean, you think about like Izzy Abanikanda, Rodney Hammond. You want to go back to, Quadri Olison. Darren Hall was a 4-star, but James Conner was a 3-star. Isaac Bennett was a 3-star. Dion Lewis was a 3-star. Obviously, LaShawn McCoy, Ray Graham, Darren Hall, like I mentioned, were 4-star guys. But A.J. Davis was a 4-star. Michael Salahuddin was a 4-star. If it was a 4-star offensive lineman, if it was one of these 4-star defensive tackles that they have, I would be a little bit more concerned. But I just can't get too worked up over losing a running back, particularly when they have another running back in the class. And so they signed 2 last year. One of them already is left in the transfer portal, but they also brought in a transfer with that, last offseason. They had 2 in the class, Yassine Willis and Jules Goff from Eastern PA. Willis is out, but they still have Goff, and Goff looks really good. He's a 3-star, and he looks like the kind of 3-star who can have success in college. So I can't get too caught up or too worked up about the loss of Yassine Willis. It's disappointing. He is a really talented player. I don't mean to diminish his talent. I think he's a good player. He's Pitt will face him for a couple of years, and he'll be good. But I just can't get too worked up about losing a running back, even if it's the more highly touted running back. I think in the 2020 class, Pitt had Izzy Abanikanda and Henry Parrish, and I believe Parrish was rated higher. I think Parrish might have been a 4-star prospect, and he decommitted, and he ended up at Miami or Ole Miss, and then Miami, however went down. But Izzy obviously ended up being the best back out of that group. So I just can't get, and this isn't they can always get good 3-stars or whatever, but they've done really well at it at running back. Running back's been a position where they've done a good job getting those lower rated guys. And I think probably across the country, you find that a lot of lower rated guys, 3-star guys, can have success at running back. So I'm not too worked up about losing this commitment, although, it hurts the class ranking. It hurts how the class looks. But in practical terms, Pitt will be fine. All right, look at that. We went almost a half hour on today's episode because we had so much to talk about. And there were still like 3 or 4 other things we could have talked about. Maybe 2 or 3 other things we could have talked about that we never got around to. But, you'll have this when it's as busy a weekend as it was this past weekend. Fortunately for us, we have 4 more days this week to talk about these things, plus a live stream, lots of Morning Pitt videos, all these things happening right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and subscribe. That way you'll never miss any of our Pitt video content, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and head over to the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. I'm going to wrap this up before I sneeze. So thanks for watching the video today. I hope you had a great weekend. I hope you have a great Monday, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.